Coming up on The Color Between the Lines, I talk with renowned psychologist Robin L. Smith. You probably remember her as Dr. Robin on Oprah. Well, she talks with me about the emotional toll that George Floyd's death had on Black America and how 5 years later, many of us are still carrying the weight. I'm Esther Dillard, chatting with writers, authors, and experts who offer an added perspective for listeners. This is The Color Between the Lines. Hey, it's Esther Dillard, and welcome back to The Color Between the Lines. In this edition, I speak with Dr. Robin L. Smith. She's an award-winning author, public speaker, as well as a nationally known psychologist. You've seen her on Oprah, and now she's co-written a book called The Invisible Egg with award-winning actor Courtney B. Vance. We talk about the impact George Floyd's death had on Black communities and how some of that trauma we still carry in silence today. So let's go back to May 2020. The pandemic had been just declared in March. People had been sheltering in place. And then in May, George Floyd is literally killed in front of all of America and the world on video.
Yes.
And what did you see from as far as your patients and Black Americans that what did you see from them as far as how emotionally this was impacting them?
You know, it's interesting as I reflect almost, 5 years ago. I want to share something personal first. Just that my mother at the time, who was 98 years old and vibrant and powerful, her mother lived to be 108 and a half, only dying in my grandmother in 2012. So my mother was well, and when she turned 98 in March, right when the shutdown happened, everyone said, "You've got at least another 10 years." And she died on the 28th of May, and her service was the same day of George Floyd's, June 9th. And so I talked about that at her eulogy, that there were major moves and grief happening all around the country and world, some for my mother, but certainly for George Floyd. So I share that because there is a particular grief that I not only shared with the world, but I also shared with my family as I reflected that my mother had lived a great, magnificent life. And then I looked at George Floyd, who was killed in front of all of us. And we watched it again and again and again. That this will happen, also, I'm sure, this 5th-year anniversary. And we have to think about how we are not only traumatized in the moment, but how we re-traumatize ourselves without knowing it. Sometimes we call it honor because we want to bear witness to the unimaginable crime of life that happened to George Floyd, crime of the soul, just a crime of injustice. So we feel at times that our way of paying homage is to continue to bear witness to the very thing that not only keeps us up at night, but that actually tortures the soul. And so I say that because we have an opportunity in this moment of reflecting 5 years later that COVID is not gone. We should also be quite aware that it is not over. It has changed form and formulas, and so has racism. It's not gone. And the hatred often and fear of Black bodies, and particularly Black male bodies. We're in a time right now that we also could not have imagined would revisit. So it is not just George Floyd's the anniversary of his killing, but it is also a political landscape that seems as shocking and yet predictable. If we don't deal with what is going on within, and this is for all of us, this is every human being. I say if it doesn't come out in the wash, it's going to come out in the rinse, but it is coming out. And so this is really what we are looking at, the manifestation of hate.
Hmm. What at that time were you telling folks that were dealing with emotions at that time? What did you advise them to do who were very much traumatized, who were trying to put it in a box or put it somewhere? How were you telling them to deal with it?
Yeah, this was then and it is now, that we have to parcel out how much of something we let in. And it's really essential that people are, I mean, you're a journalist, and in many ways, so am I. I'm a psychologist, I'm a minister, but I've spent a lot of time in the media and, working on television and radio. And of course, we want people watching and listening and participating in our conversation, no question about that. And it is important that every human being protects what I call our central nervous system. We don't think about what we do to our central nervous system. So I have people who know me well, both, professionally, but also family. And I'll just say, this is not good for my central nervous system. And they will chuckle and I'll say, no, I mean that. I'm really paying attention. And so what I was telling people then is what I am telling people now. Pay attention to what the information is doing to you. Is it making you more anxious? Is it making you more aggressive? Is it creating deeper fear or hostility or paranoia? All paranoia does not mean that we are out of touch with reality. And at the same time, how do you, me, and everyone who is, joining us in this moment, how do we begin to self-protect? Not be in denial. This isn't about burying our heads or our hearts in the sand, but it is about saying, how much access am I giving something that is traumatic?
Mm.
How much do I let it creep in? How much does it get in that I'm unaware? See, this is the other part. We could say, oh, I am protective. And then if we were to peel the onion back and take a closer look under the microscope, if you will, we might find that there are things that find themselves in us that we didn't know had entered.
I wanted you to hopefully address something that I had talked to other medical professionals and mental health professionals about, and that is that they felt that since George Floyd's passing, that there has been an increase in at least awareness of culturally competent care, meaning those professionals like yourself are looking at the cultural landscape and applying it to the patient when it wasn't that way in the past. Do you see that as well? And how so?
Yeah, I do. Some of us have been doing that for, the last 2 decades. And then there were others who were maybe a little delayed in arriving at the reality that particularly African American and Black people do bring a unique set of dynamics to the table of their own lives. And if you have a medical or psychological, uh, you know, perspective that does not take into account the unique particularities that a Black person brings, and I would say that we're dealing with immigration or maybe, I don't know if we're dealing with it or not, but it is stirred up. And so unless we are able to really see, how does this person who sits in front of me, what is their story? And what is the uniqueness of their story because of the cultural and racial and ethnic and sexual, preferences and orientation? I mean, what does that put in front of me? And unless I can see the wholeness of that person, it's quite likely that my treatment of them would be, and not treatment, I mean, that could be, again, medical, psychological, but also how I see them as a whole human being. I tell people that we all have holes, HOLES, longing to be whole, WHOLE, which is a holy, HOLY journey.
Mm.
And so a part of what you're asking in terms of cultural competence is, how do I understand the particular holes, HOLES, and how have they been ushered in? What has enslavement created, not only in the person who was enslaved, but also in the enslaver? There's so many ways that if we're only looking at where we are a victim and not how, where does the perpetrator, and because if we aren't addressing that whole, system, it is impossible to really work toward healing. And that's part of what's happening in this country. There is, and this is true for the country, it is true for families, that, we cannot want to see parts of our own families. We don't want to know things that we don't want to know, but it doesn't mean that they're not true. It doesn't mean because I don't want to know something, because it feels unbearable, that there was abuse or sexual or physical or verbal abuse in our families, addiction. So my denial does not make it not so. And this is also true in the country. George Floyd's killing, we can want it to be something other than what it was. And if we do that, we miss the opportunity to feel the gut punch and the brutality of watching him die, and die unnecessarily, die because we are still struggling in this country with issues that we don't want to own. And just because we don't want to own them does not make them so.
I think it's very interesting, the whole dynamic, that there's so many layers that could be addressed here in terms of, especially with Black men and how they have to now navigate in this new landscape, especially this new political climate. Um, and how do you, I guess, advise, what do you see as far as how Black men are dealing with uh, this political landscape, as well as dealing with police, trying to keep themselves safe, yet keep their masculinity, all that. It's just so many
Mhm.
different layers in that. What are you finding that is helping, I guess, them navigate it?
Yeah. When we go on a site, online, sometimes there is a request for verification, and it will say, it used to say, verify this, and where was your, cousin born, or what school did you go to? And I saw something, you are aware, of course, that Courtney B. Vance and I wrote The Invisible Ache. And one of the things, as Courtney and I were on the road together, talking about the invisible ache, particularly to and with Black men or Black women who love their sons, brothers, partners. Um, One of the things that I shared is I had gone online, and there was something I had not seen before, and now I've seen it many times, and it says, check, I am human. The reason I mention that is when you ask about what am I seeing and saying to Black men and Black boys, it is to check their box that indeed I am human, not 3/5, not some fractured uh, piece of a human being, but I am human. And so it is in their humanity that Black men and boys, I'm hoping and certainly encouraging them to claim all of who they are. And that means their feelings, those that they're comfortable with, and those that they are maybe afraid of or ashamed of. I mean, that's part of their birthright, to be wholly human. That harm that can come from a boy or a man of any race, but particularly African American, to feel like that they cannot cry, because tough boys and tough men, and somebody will think I'm a punk, or it'll take my power away, not knowing that not only are tears our teachers, so when they show up, they're there for a reason, but also not only are they a teacher, but they're part of your superpower to know that indeed I am human. And so when we've had our humanity chipped away at, and particularly Black boys and men, they could find themselves feeding into a narrative that they themselves did not write, that does not serve them well, and that actually reinforces that I'm not human, like wholly human, 5/5 all the way, 100%, 10 toes down human. And so that is what I am encouraging the Black men and boys in my life and in my work, in my heart, that they check the box. I am human.
I love that. I love that. How has this, since George Floyd's passing and the new political landscape, how has that, I guess, affected your practice and affected you personally? Has there
Yeah.
been a change in the differences of people coming into your doors, like younger people, people that you've never seen before? I wonder.
It's interesting. I have, because my work is not as much in private practice in the same way anymore, but I have a lot of people who are reaching out to me, both younger and also older, Black boys and young men and older men, who are trying to figure out how to piece their lives together in this new landscape. What does it mean to stay safe and at the same time to live? To not withdraw from life and withdraw from, and this is true for people in general. There are a lot of people who want to just check out, at least maybe for the next 2 to 4 years, and hope that things will get better. And while I understand that, that's not how it works. This is an inside job that requires that we show up for active duty. And active duty doesn't just mean the hard work, it also means pleasure. I'm really encouraging boys and men, like, where's your joy? What are you doing for fun and for lightness, for delight? And sometimes people look at me like, well, what world are you in? And I said, I'm in the same one you're in, which means that it's a requirement. Again, part of your strength and part of your superpower is that there has to be joy and community in the mix of this hard work. So I'm seeing, somebody just asked me yesterday, what percentage of people on a Black boys and men, like, do I think that they are less engaged? And I said, no, actually, I think they are more engaged and more attuned that they belong here, that they belong. Yeah.
I'm going to say the final word because I know that we've covered a lot of ground, but there might be something that you feel that you wanted to make a point and that people could, I guess, take away from our
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a proverb that I often quote, and it says, it's an African proverb that says, the lion's story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. And so I leave us, you, me, all those who have gathered, the audience, with the takeaway, how essential it is to tell your own story. And you might say, Dr. Robin, people don't care. I'm in a society, I'm in a family, I'm on a job where no one cares. And I don't know, where someone is, but what I do know is this, that who needs to care about your story is you. That often the person we've been waiting for has been waiting for us, and it is us. So Prince Charming and Princess Charming isn't necessarily coming, but who has already arrived is the originator of your own story. And so I just want to remind people of the power of telling your own story. The lion's story will never be told, never be known, as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. And sometimes we think that the hunter is outside, and there is a hunter outside, but there can become a hunter inside, where I begin to participate in the demise of my own dignity. And so I encourage everyone to claim your own story and find a safe person or community to tell it. There's freedom, and there is liberation, and there is joy, and there is strength when we tell and claim our own story.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robin L. Smith, for joining us on the BIN.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor. Esther, thank you so much.
That's it for this edition of The Color Between the Lines. You can catch more episodes on the Color Between the Lines YouTube channel, on iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.